In this video, we will learn 10 new words through short stories. It might seem like a small step, but in 100 days, you will easily learn 1,000 words, which is a big achievement. To help you learn better, please watch each video twice. At the end of the video, try to make your own sentences using the new words you've learned. Stay with us and let's explore today's new words.
The antagonistic neighbor. I moved to a small, quiet village last year. First, everything seemed perfect. People were friendly, the streets were peaceful, and my house had a beautiful garden. But then I met Mr. Brown, my neighbor. He was, without a doubt, the most antagonistic person I had ever known. First time I saw him, he shouted at me, "Your tree is too tall. It blocks the sun from my garden," he yelled. I tried to explain that the tree was there before I moved in, but he wouldn't listen. His antagonistic attitude made me nervous every time I saw him. One morning, I woke up to find my garden gate broken. I suspected Mr. Brown. When I asked him, he denied it, but his antagonistic tone made me think otherwise. "Why would I care about your silly gate?" he said with a sneer. His behavior didn't stop there. If I played music, he complained that it was too loud. If I parked my car on the street, he knocked on my door to argue about it. His antagonistic nature made living next to him a daily challenge. One day, I decided to confront him. "Mr. Brown," I said, "why are you always so antagonistic toward me? I have done nothing to harm you." For the first time, he paused. He looked down and sighed. "I guess I'm lonely," he admitted. His words surprised me. I didn't expect an antagonistic man like him to feel this way. From that day on, I tried to be kinder to him. Slowly, his antagonistic behavior softened. He still complained sometimes, but he also started waving at me when I came home. I learned something important. Even antagonistic people have a story. Sometimes all they need is someone who tries to understand them.
The benevolent stranger. It was a cold winter evening, and I was walking home from work. Snow covered the streets, and the wind was strong. My hands were frozen, and I couldn't wait to reach the warmth of my small apartment. Suddenly, I saw an old man sitting on the sidewalk. He looked tired and cold. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. As I stood there, unsure of what to do, a man in a long coat approached. He had a kind smile and warm eyes. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked the old man. The man shook his head, saying he had no home and no food. The stranger nodded and said, "Don't worry. I'll help you." The stranger's benevolent nature amazed me. He gave the old man his scarf and glove. Then, he helped him stand and said, "Come with me. I'll find you a warm place to stay." I followed them quietly, curious about this benevolent man who seemed so kind to a stranger. We reached a small diner. The stranger bought the old man a hot meal and sat with him. "Everyone deserves kindness," he said. His words stayed in my mind. I realized that being benevolent means more than just helping. It means truly caring for others. Before leaving, the stranger paid for a hotel room for the old man. He handed him a little money and said, "Take care of yourself, my friend." The old man had tears in his eyes. "Thank you. You are so benevolent," he whispered. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the stranger's benevolent actions. His kindness inspired me. The next day, I bought some food and gave it to a homeless man near my street. For the first time, I understood the joy of being benevolent. Kindness is powerful. A single benevolent act can change someone's life, and maybe even inspire others to do the same.
Conspicuous red hat. It all began with a red hat. A bright, conspicuous red hat that caught everyone's attention. I was on my way to the park when I first noticed it. A man walked through the crowd, wearing the most conspicuous hat I had ever seen. It wasn't just red, it was glowing in the sunlight, almost impossible to ignore. People turned their heads as he passed. Children pointed, and even busy shoppers paused to look. Curious, I decided to follow him. His hat was so conspicuous that I didn't even need to stay close to keep track of him. Wherever he went, people whispered, their eyes fixed on that bright red hat. He entered a small coffee shop, and I sat at a table nearby, pretending to read a book. I couldn't stop wondering, why would someone wear something so conspicuous? Did he want attention? Was there a story behind it? As he sipped his coffee, a little girl walked up to him. "I like your hat," she said with a big smile. The man laughed and tipped his conspicuous hat. "Thank you," he replied. "It reminds me to be bold and never hide who I am." His words stayed with me. That conspicuous hat wasn't just about standing out, it was about being confident, about embracing what makes you unique. When he left, I watched him disappear into the crowd. Even as he walked away, his conspicuous hat shone like a beacon, reminding everyone to notice the little things that make life interesting. That evening, I looked at my plain black coat and thought about adding a splash of color. Maybe being a little conspicuous isn't such a bad thing after all. Sometimes standing out can inspire others to do the same. The detrimental decision. Last year, I made a decision that changed everything. It seemed small at first, but it turned out to be detrimental in ways I never imagined. I had just started a new job. It was exciting but also stressful. To cope with the pressure, I began staying up late, scrolling through my phone for hours. First, I thought it was harmless. What's the harm in a little distraction? I told myself. But soon this habit became detrimental to my health. I was tired every morning. My lack of sleep made it hard to focus at work. My boss noticed my mistakes, and my colleagues started asking if I was okay. I didn't realize how detrimental my choices were until one day I almost caused a big problem at work. During an important meeting, I forgot a key report. My boss was furious. "This kind of behavior is detrimental to the team," she said. Her words hit me hard. I knew she was right. That night, I sat down to think. My habit wasn't just detrimental to my work, it was also affecting my relationships and health. My friends complained I was always distracted. I had constant headaches and I felt exhausted all the time. I decided to change. I set a strict bedtime and put my phone away an hour before sleeping. The first week was tough, but slowly I started feeling better. My energy improved, my work performance got better, and my boss even praised me. Looking back, I realize how a small habit can become detrimental if you're not careful. Now, whenever I face a decision, I ask myself, will this be helpful or detrimental? Life is full of choices. Some help you grow, while others can be detrimental. Key is learning to choose wisely. The egregious mistake. It all started with one egregious mistake. I didn't know how badly it would affect me, but the consequences were bigger than I ever imagined. Last summer, I got a new job at a busy office. My boss was strict and every task had to be perfect. One day, she gave me an important assignment to send an email to all our clients about a major policy change. Be careful, she warned. An egregious mistake could ruin our reputation. I nodded confidently, but I was also nervous. I worked on the email for hours, checking every detail. Or at least I thought I checked every detail. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Emails and calls poured in from angry clients. Confused, I opened the email I had sent. That's when I saw it, a huge, egregious error in the policy details. Instead of offering clients a discount, my email promised free services. My boss stormed into my office. "Do you realize how egregious this mistake is?" she shouted. Her face was red with anger. I felt terrible. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. But sorry wasn't enough. The egregious mistake cost the company a lot of money. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How could I make such an egregious error? I replayed the moment in my head over and over, wishing I could go back and fix it. Determined to make things right, I worked harder than ever. I double-checked every task, asked for feedback, and even stayed late to help my team. Slowly, I regained my boss's trust. I'll never forget that egregious mistake. Taught me a lesson I'll carry forever. Details matter, and one careless action can have egregious consequences. Now, I always think twice before sending an email. After all, avoiding an egregious error is better than fixing one. The feasible dream. I had always wanted to start my own bakery. It was my dream, but everyone around me said it wasn't feasible. "You don't have enough money," my friend Sarah said. "It's not feasible without big savings," my brother added. "Running a business isn't easy. Are you sure it's even feasible for you?" First, I felt discouraged. Was my dream really not feasible? But one day, I decided to stop doubting myself and start planning. I grabbed a notebook and wrote down everything I needed: a location, ingredients, equipment, and a way to attract customers. Breaking it into steps made my dream feel more feasible. I realized I didn't need a fancy shop right away. Starting small was more feasible, so I decided to bake from home and sell my cakes at the local market. First few weeks were tough. I had to wake up early, bake all day, and set up a stall. But people loved my cakes. They asked for more and even recommended me to their friends. Suddenly, my small dream started to feel very feasible. With the money I earned, I bought better equipment. For a few months, I rented a tiny shop in town. It wasn't easy, but every day I reminded myself that hard work made my dream more feasible. One day, Sarah visited my bakery. She smiled and said, I didn't think this was feasible, but you proved me wrong. Hearing that made me proud. Now, whenever I see someone with a big dream, I tell them, it's always feasible if you break it into steps and believe in yourself. My bakery isn't just a business. It's proof that even the hardest dreams are feasible if you're willing to work for them. The meticulous plan. It was the night before the big event. I was in charge of organizing my sister's wedding, and everything had to be perfect. To make it happen, I had to be meticulous, very careful about every single detail. From the moment we started planning, my sister kept reminding me, "You must be meticulous. This is the most important day of my life." So I made a long list and checked it twice, making sure not to miss anything. First, I inspected the decorations. Every flower had to be in the right place, and every chair had to face the aisle perfectly. Be meticulous or it won't look magical, I told myself. Then came the food. I went to the kitchen to watch the chefs. "Please be meticulous with the cake," I said. "Each layer must be even and the design has to match the theme." The chef nodded, smiling at my meticulous instructions. Even the invitations had to be meticulous. I checked each one to ensure the names were spelled correctly. I didn't want anyone to feel left out because of a mistake. On the day of the wedding, I arrived early to review everything one last time. I walked down the aisle, checking every flower, chair, and light. My sister looked at me and said, "You've been so meticulous, and it shows. Everything is beautiful." As the ceremony began, I couldn't help but smile. Being meticulous wasn't easy. It took time, patience, and effort. But in the end, every small detail came together to create a perfect moment. After the wedding, guests praised my work. One person said, "Your meticulous planning made this wedding unforgettable." I felt proud because I knew that being careful and paying attention to details truly made a difference. Now, whenever someone asks for advice, I always say, be meticulous. It's the key to success. The omnipresent feeling. Everywhere I went, it was there, the omnipresent feeling of being watched. First, I thought I was imagining it. But soon, the sensation became too strong to ignore. It all started a month ago when I moved into an old house in a small, quiet town. The house was beautiful but lonely. Yet, even when I was alone, the sense of something omnipresent never left me. In the kitchen, I would feel it as I prepared my meals. In the living room, the omnipresent feeling followed me while I read my book. Even in my bedroom with the door locked, I couldn't escape. The feeling was truly omnipresent everywhere all the time. One night, I decided to search for the source of this omnipresent presence. I checked every corner of the house, from the attic to the basement, but there was nothing. Still, the omnipresent sense of being watched remained. The next day, I asked my neighbor about the house. She smiled mysteriously and said, "Oh, that feeling? It's the house itself. Its history is omnipresent, always surrounding those who live here." Her words made me think. Was the house's past really so strong that it felt omnipresent? I began to learn more about it, stories of the families who lived there, their joys and their tragedies. The more I learned, the more I understood the omnipresent energy of the house. But then something changed. The omnipresent feeling that once frightened me started to comfort me. Felt as if the house was alive, watching over me, protecting me. Now I no longer fear the omnipresent sensation. Instead, I welcome it. It reminds me that history, emotions, and memories are never gone. They are omnipresent, shaping our lives even when we don't realize it. When I look around my home now, I smile. The omnipresent presence I once feared has become my silent companion. Pervasive shadow. Started with a simple shadow. First, I noticed it in the corner of my room. It wasn't big or threatening, but it felt pervasive, spreading everywhere without my permission. I tried to ignore it. It's just a trick of the light, I told myself. But the pervasive shadow didn't leave. Instead, it seemed to grow. When I went to the kitchen, it was there. When I sat on the couch, I felt its pervasive presence creeping into my mind. One evening, as I walked home from work, I saw the shadow again. This time, it wasn't just in one place, it was everywhere. The pervasive feeling of darkness seemed to surround the streets, the trees, even the air. I couldn't escape it. I told my best friend about it. There's this pervasive shadow, I explained. It's everywhere I go. It's not just in my house anymore. She looked at me with concern and said, "Maybe it's not a shadow. Maybe it's a feeling. Fear can be pervasive too." Her words stayed with me. Was this shadow real, or was it my fear growing stronger, more pervasive with every thought? That night, I sat alone in my room, facing the pervasive shadow. "Why are you here?" I whispered. The shadow didn't answer, but I realized something important. The more I focused on it, the more pervasive it became. So I decided to fight back. I opened the windows, letting light fill the room. I played cheerful music and called a friend to chat. Slowly, the pervasive shadow began to fade. Now, whenever I feel something pervasive, whether it's a shadow or a fear, I remember this. It only grows if you let it. Light, laughter, and love can chase away even the most pervasive darkness. The shadow taught me an important lesson. What feels pervasive can be defeated if you face it with courage. The resilient tree. When I was a child, there was a tree in our backyard. It wasn't the tallest or the strongest tree, but it was the most resilient. No matter what happened, it never gave up. One year, a terrible storm came. The wind was strong, the rain heavy. I thought the tree wouldn't survive. Its branches bent, its leaves scattered everywhere. But the next morning, there it stood, broken but still standing. It was resilient. I remember asking my grandfather, "Why doesn't the tree fall?" "It's so small." He smiled and said, "It's not about being big or strong. It's about being resilient. Tree knows how to bend without breaking. It fights back even when it's hurt." As I grew older, life threw storms at me too. I failed an important exam once and felt like giving up. But I remembered the resilient tree. If the tree can stand tall again, I thought, so can I. Later, when I lost my job, the pain felt overwhelming. But my grandfather's words echoed in my mind. Be resilient. You can bend without breaking. Slowly, I started looking for new opportunities. Each day I became more resilient, learning how to bounce back from difficulties. One spring I noticed something amazing. The tree, now older and scarred, was blooming with beautiful flowers. It had faced years of storms, yet it still grew. It reminded me that being resilient doesn't mean never falling. It means rising every time you do. Now, whenever I face challenges, I think of that tree. Scars tell a story of survival, of resilience. And just like the tree, I remind myself to be resilient, to keep going, to keep growing no matter what life throws my way. The tree taught me that resilience is the key to living. To be resilient is to never give up no matter how hard the storm.